welcome to the Red Pill Sports and Entertainment Show. As always, brought to you by Open Source Self-Defense, Fitness, and Grappling. We're going to get into the UFC 231 predictions, Polaris 8, and we're going to cover a little bit about the 2018 NFL Week 14. That being said, I'm a big believer that life is short, and so you should have dessert first. So we're going to get into what I think is the funnest topic, the topic that has the most finality to it when it's done, and that is the main event at UFC 231, Ortega challenging Max Holloway for the featherweight title. And first and foremost, I want to say that, I have much respect for both these fighters. I think they're great fighters, and I enjoy watching them both. They're up in my top tier of fighters as far as enjoyment of watching. But I'm just going to say right off the bat, I do have Brian Ortega in this fight winning via submission late in the fight, most likely mid to late fourth round. Now, before we get into why, let's talk about some of the similarities between these fighters. Some of the similarities is they both like to move forward and put pressure on their opponent. You see that Ortega in all of his fights, he tries to put pressure forward and basically stay in that pocket of boxing range. Max Holloway likes to push forward and stay in a kickboxing style range and make his opponents miss. Where these opponents differ is kind of their striking tactics, right? Ortega is more heavily leans towards a more strict boxing style, where Max tends to be more of a kickboxing stylist. However, with that being said, I would say that Max's style is more of an American kickboxing style than like a Muay Thai style. That's just my personal opinion from watching him. What they both like to do is they both like to circle to their open side. They both will switch stances. In other words, they'll go from orthodox to southpaw. And when they do that, they like to circle to the open side of their stance. Now, this could be problematic specifically for Max because when he is respectful of a fighter's power and technique. In other words, he thinks he's dealing with a striker that both has KO power and has good technique. He tends to fight more in the orthodox style. I think this is because he feels like his defensive prowess is higher in the orthodox style. So he likes to fight in that orthodox style. And so we'll know right away whether or not Max respects Brian Ortega's power and technique if he stays primarily in his orthodox style. If Holloway starts switching stances right away from the jump, that generally means he either does not respect Ortega's punching power or he doesn't really respect his tactics or his technical know-how in how to strike and how to catch Max Holloway. You'll see that in Holloway's fights, both against Aldo, against Conor, he stayed primarily in an orthodox stance until with Aldo, and he didn't really start switching stances till he felt like he started to get into a rhythm, and he felt like Aldo's production was starting to fall off. And then he kind of switched stances a little bit more. Ortega kind of switches stances just on the whim. It seems like, there's just not a whole lot of tape on him, but, he tends to switch stances kind of on a whim whenever he feels it necessary or that it's going to give him an advantage. When Max is in that orthodox stance, he tends to circle to his own right side. And he gets very predictable with this. He'll back away. He'll get out of distance of striking if he feels like the other fighter is getting into a rhythm or getting good strikes off. He'll back out and circle to his right over and over and over again in a very predictable way. What happened with Conor a lot was that Conor kind of dipped off to one side and caught him with that uppercut and did a lot of damage that way. In the Aldo fight, you would think that Max would have learned, being that the Aldo fight was so many fights after the Conor McGregor fight, but we actually see Max get caught with that same uppercut. And the thing is that Ortega throws that uppercut as well. He really likes the uppercut shot as his power shot. So um, I kind of see this as being problematic for Max. Further, when I look at how they both attack the only common opponent that I can see on their resume, which is Cub Swanson, it seemed as though Max felt like the best way to disrupt Cub was every time Cub tried to sit down so that he had power to throw, Max would flurry and basically make him move off that spot. What Ortega did, I felt, was a little bit more efficient. What he did was he forced a clinch. He smothered Cub's power. He made sure that Cub couldn't get off because he was way too tight. Threw up the top, of course, submissions like everybody saw, which then made him very wary of where his hands had to be. It looked like, I think a lot of people didn't see the nuance of how Ortega got to the guillotine that ended the fight. What he did was he shot, and I don't think his shot was really intended to take down Cub. I think that what he did was he shot to push Cub up against the fence so that he could get the tie up. I think he felt like he had a very distinct advantage in the clinch game as far as getting to a position he liked for a submission. But Cub got really wise to it after nearly getting choked out in that first round. So he was doing everything he could to really shrug Ortega off. Every time Ortega tried to tie him up in the open cage, Cub would work very, very hard to shrug him off and get away and make distance. Ortega, rather than continuously trying to beat a dead horse, what he did was he started to put pressure like he usually does, and when he got close, he shot. As soon as he got Cub near the fence, he shot in and drove Cub up against the fence. What that enabled him to do is then shift to a clinch game, okay? Because there was nowhere for Cub to back up to. He couldn't just shrug off and back up and make space because there was nowhere to go. And I think that high fight IQ, I think a lot of times people overlook these little tiny things that Ortega does. Now, as far as championship rounds go, neither one of these fighters has been past the third round in their UFC career. You have to go back past their UFC career to see that they went into a fifth round. That being said, it's a much different thing for Holloway, in my opinion. I think Holloway is more apt to gas than Ortega, simply given their build and the fact that Holloway has had a hard time making weight in the last year or so. Holloway hasn't fought in over a year. I think that might come back to bite him. It's really going to be a telltale sign when we hit the third round. Max generally likes to give up kind of in the first round. He gives up a first round usually by a filling out process, then goes into the second round, starts to pick it up. If he does that same thing in this fight and it goes 4 or 5 rounds, it's going to be interesting to see if he can still keep his foot on the gas pedal in the 4th round and in the 5th round, especially since the weight cut seems to have been difficult for him the last few times. The other reason why I really like to watch these two guys fight, another similarity that they have, they both approach the fight as martial artists. In other words, they're both looking to win the fight, not win the contest, right? They're not like an athlete, okay? They're not looking to milk the rules and outpoint you, okay? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I personally enjoy a fighter that's going out to try to win the fight. They're generally looking for the TKO, the KO, or the submission, or to basically leave it where, wow, there is no question as to who outstruck who or who did the most amount of damage. Both of these fighters are very patient in that first round, so it might be a boring first round. That being said, they both like to put pressure, so I wouldn't be surprised by pretty much anything that happened in this fight in that first round. Short of a flash knockout by either opponent, I wouldn't be surprised. That's the only thing I don't think we see happening. Both fighters do a really good job of rolling with the punches. They both have great chins. So I don't think we're going to see a knockout in the first round. I personally think that the weight cut will take its toll. It will be a different story for Max when they get into the fourth round, trying to keep his foot on that gas pedal deep into the fourth round. I do see Ortega catching him as he gets tired, leaning on him. I think Ortega will not be afraid to pull him into his guard, sweep him, and submit him from the top. I do see a submission by Brian Ortega late after the mid in the late fourth round. Okay, guys, let's move on. Okay, next we have Valentina versus Joanna. This is a fight I really want to see, mostly because I want to see if Valentina really translates into this weight as well as I think she's going to. If what I believe is true, I think this is going to be a short fight, probably done in the first round, possibly mid-second round. I think Valentina is just going to be the more powerful, quicker, faster striker. I think that her jiu-jitsu game, her MMA jiu-jitsu game is much more well-rounded. Seems like Joanna uses her wrestling just as, anti-wrestling. Her grappling is an anti-grappling game. It really isn't that offensive. I don't really see it as being that dangerous. Being that Valentina got Rose prepped to defeat Joanna 2 times, I really see Valentina just being a much more powerful striker. I think this fight just does not go the distance. I see a pretty much a one-sided victory for Valentina. And I'm really excited to see if I'm correct because Joanna is a game opponent. I just think that at this weight class, there's not a lot of people that match up well with Valentina. I just don't think so. So I'm really excited to see if I'm right on that. And so it's a really fun fight that I want to check out. Next thing I wanted to mention is Polaris 8 is on Sunday. There's some matches here that I'm really excited to watch. Jones versus Cornelius, Ryan versus Eminari, and Ben Henderson going straight grappling. These are really interesting matches to me. I'm super excited to check these out. I'll be pulling probably for Jones, probably pulling for Henderson and Ryan, but I think these are some super interesting matches. If you have UFC Fight Pass, man, use it to its utmost. Check these guys out. Check out where the game of grappling is going. This is going to give you a heads up as to what you're going to see coming into the UFC soon. These guys are at the top of the food chain when it comes to no-gi grappling. Okay, these concepts and these ideas that you're going to see in Polaris 8, these things, these are the strategies, the tactics, the submissions. These are even some of the names that you're probably going to start seeing, coming into UFC and into Bellator, into One Championship, right? These guys are high level submission guys, and I think it'd be worth your while to check it out, man. All right, then, and that brings us into Week 14 of the NFL season. Some really key games going on this week. I mean, the Chiefs are in a big game. The Patriots are in a big game. The Rams are in a big game. Of course, the Saints are in a big game. The Rams are playing, the Bears, a big game. The Cowboys are playing the Philadelphia Eagles, big game. This season, you look at these leaders, right, in their divisions, and you have the Chiefs at 10-2, the Patriots at 9-3, the Saints at 10-2, and it's crazy to think that this season, with only 4 games left in the season, right, that 10-2 and 9-3 has not guaranteed a playoff spot. Right now, the Rams at 11-1 is the only team that has a playoff spot clinched. I think they also have their division clinched, right? But they're the only ones at 11-1. 10-2 isn't doing it this year. That is crazy that at this point in the season you have so many teams still in the hunt to win their division. Of course, you have the Dallas Cowboys. Big, huge game. I think the entire league will have their eyes on the Dallas Cowboys. All of fandom will have their eyes on the Dallas Cowboys this weekend. And why? Because they're playing the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, let's talk about who has more pressure on them here. Is it the Eagles or is it the Cowboys? I would have to say at this point, it's got to be the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the Philadelphia Eagles are in a must-win situation. I don't think that's true for the Cowboys. And this is why. If the Dallas Cowboys come out and they absolutely get blown out, it breaks the momentum of their season. Now, if they come out and they make it a dogfight, and that defense plays with the exact same intensity that it played with against the Saints, they make it a close game, and Wentz has to have some kind of spectacular, heroic, last minute and a half drive to get them into field goal range for Philadelphia to kick a game-winning field goal, I don't think that breaks the Cowboys' momentum, because that means that the defense still played a very high caliber game and limited in offense and kept them in the game. So I don't think that breaks the Cowboys' momentum. However, given the records right now, if the Cowboys can start to build a bigger gap between them and the Philadelphia Eagles, if the Philadelphia Eagles get swept by the Dallas Cowboys this season, I think pretty much their season is over, and you need to pencil in the Cowboys as the NFC East division winners. And that's just all there is to it. If the Cowboys shut them down, if it's a dominant win, pretty much it's putting everybody else in the conference on notice that the Cowboys are for real. When the Cowboys win this game, it's going to be interesting to me to hear what the talking heads have to say next week regarding Jason Garrett, regarding Jerry Jones, or more aptly, how much they don't talk about either one of those men. It seems very telling to me how irrational the hate for the Dallas Cowboys is within the media, when they never tend to ever want to give Jason Garrett the credit or Jerry Jones the credit. However, they're quick to blame them and call them quote-unquote dysfunctional. Okay? Right now, this Cowboys offensive coaching staff and head coach is very, very impressive to me. Very impressive because they are limited on offense compared to other offenses. They are limited by their quarterback. Yet they're finding ways to put together game-winning drives, to put together a offensive plan that eats up clock, that gains first downs, that keeps their defense fresh so that their defense can do what it needs to do to win the game. So, anyhow, it's going to be interesting to me. It's going to be super fun, I think, this weekend. This weekend is jam-packed full of good stuff to check out. So, have fun. But remember, be practical. Be purposeful. Get fit with a purpose, guys.